So we're getting close to the end of the week. Today we want to look at Acts 4, 12 through 14. So, very important theological verse in verse 12. And not is in another, none other, not is in none other, the salvation. So salvation is in none other. Salvation from what, of course? Of course, for a Jew, salvation was had a primarily corporate sense to it. You know, salvation from our enemies, salvation from the Romans, restoration. Salvation implied the healing of the national identity, and by national, I don't mean in modern terms, because of course, nationalism is as it currently exists, is a fairly modern phenomenon dating from the 1800s. But in terms of a ethnic identity or people identity, let's put that, the people group of Israel with their own king and their own leaders, salvation would have implied for Jews the restoration of that. We have a very individualized sense of salvation that is, kind of developed in terms of on a popular level, heaven and hell, although probably the early church saw salvation more in terms of escaping judgment of the earth and a new earth, a new restoration of the earth, more than a kind of eternal escape pod destiny kind of thing. But salvation, of course, for Luke is an interesting, because Luke is not quite as apocalyptic. Luke is not quite as much of an emphasis on hell as Matthew, for example. But anyway, we can wrap it all somewhat together from a biblical theological perspective and say that Christians believe that Jesus is the only means by which one can be reconciled to God, that there are not multiple paths to God. There is only one way to God. There's only one path to God, and that is through Jesus. There is no salvation in any other. For not even name is different. This is bad English. Not even name is different. But we know how it comes out when we put it on our Greek computer. It comes out. There's no different name under heaven, under the sky. There's no other name under the sky that has been given. The to dedomenon goes with onoma. So it's a name, the having been given name. So this article tacks this participle onto onoma, the having been given name. For there is not even a different having been given name, or a relative clause is a good way to translate a participle with the article. If the participle has the article, use who or that. For there is no different name that has been given. This is perfect tense. You can see the delta got a little beside itself and put an epsilon in the middle, so it's perfect. And of course, it's the ending is shoved right on the stem because the stem is do, so it's perfect Miller passive. So, for there is no different name that has been given among people. I put peeps so that I didn't have to do another line. And I didn't want to put among men because anthropos is really not just males. It's mortals, it's humans. No other name has been given. So we have this verse by which it is necessary for us to be saved. Great, very important verse theologically. There is no other, for there is no salvation in any other, nor is there any other name under heaven given among people by which we might be saved. Only Jesus. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And remember, I'm building this thesis that the Gospel of John may in some way echo the book of Acts. This is an aorist passive infinitive. Theta 8, it tells us it's aorist passive. 6 out of 7 infinitives end in I, so to be saved. And the subject, quote unquote, of an infinitive is in the accusative case. It is necessary for us to be saved. The word it is necessary expects an infinitive. There's certain words, like there's a Greek word, I'm about. Well, I'm about to do what? It expects an infinitive. Day is one of those words that expects an infinitive. Verse 13, and beholding, my aunt is an active participle, and observing the boldness of Peter. Again, Greek loves to do this. The of Peter boldness. We put it in our Greek pipe, smoke it, and it comes out. You know, the boldness of Peter. And of John too. Okay, John's there. You know, he hasn't said anything, but he's right there. You go, Peter. But the boldness, having observed or observing the boldness of Peter and John, and perceiving, it's lobbing you an aorist. Men are passive participle, although this one is, I think, probably deponent. So it's not really passive, it's just looking passive. And perceiving that, noun clause, uneducated men they are, uneducated people. Anthropoi is mortals or humans rather than men. Perceiving that they are unlettered people and not idiots, although that's idiotai. That would be an anachronistic translation. They're unlearned. Perceiving that they were uneducated and unlearned. Now, there are some who would say that agrammatoi should be translated as illiterate. I mentioned in the overview that my colleague, Absent Joseph, doesn't like that translation. It might suggest that they don't know Greek, unlettered, they don't know letters. You could take it that way. Although it seems to me we don't have really enough information. Would a Galilean fisherman like Peter have likely been illiterate? It's possible, quite possible, in fact. I kind of wonder if it would be more likely than not. However, so that you get into some issues here because, the authorship of 1st and 2nd Peter is a matter of debate among scholars. And so you can see why some people feel very strongly, no, this isn't illiterate, because that would play into the idea that a Peter could not have written a 1st or 2nd Peter. Of course, 1st Peter says that it was written with the help of Silas. What does that mean? It just says with the help of Silas. Okay, but anyway, in any case, they're untrained. And they do not have a formal education. And so the leaders, ephthalmadzon, they were marveling, imperfect tense. The imperfect tense is the present stem with an augment. So thalmadzo is the word, all the letters of the present tense stem are there with an augment. So it's imperfect. They were marveling. They began to marvel, you might say that. And, postpositive, and they were recognizing, another imperfect, epigenosko, all the letters are there, an augment has replaced the iota. They were recognizing them, that, noun clause, with the Jesus they were. That'll preach. They realized that they had been with Jesus. Things are different when you've been with Jesus. And, final verse for the day, and seeing the man, my aunt is an active participle. This is one of those where Greek puts the participle last when we would like it first. We would like it and seeing the man, whereas Greek puts it and the man seeing with them, standing, and seeing the man standing there with him, hard to deny it, there he is, the man who had been healed, the having been healed man. This again, we saw this earlier today, where this tone tacks this participle onto anthropon, which came before. So it becomes an attributive construction. And Ken's rule, if a participle has the article, use who or that. The man who, having been healed, but that's not good English, the man who had been healed. This is a perfect participle because the theta got a little beside itself in its unbreathy form. So rough, aspirated consonants like f reduplicate with their unvoiced, timid partner. They're dentals. Tau, delta, theta go together. Tau is unvoiced. T. Delta is voiced. D. And then th is breathy. T, probably aspirated like that originally. And so the breathy ones reduplicate with their unvoiced partner. Okay, so, and the man who had been healed. By the way, astota is I believe, a perfect participle of histemi. So you can see the st of histemi, to stand. It's the sigmas reduplicate sometimes. I don't know that this is the right way to put it, but sigmas seem to reduplicate sometimes with a rough breathing mark. So that rough breathing mark there, hestota, seems to be all that's kind of left of the sigma reduplicating. Histemi doesn't reduplicate with a sigma. We saw that sozo, to save, reduplicates with a sigma, but histemi doesn't. It's just a weird word. I've kind of tucked it somewhere in the back of my mind that this is a perfect participle of histemi. It's very short at the end here, isn't it? Seeing them with them having stood is probably a more literal translation. Seeing the man with them having stood, the having been healed man, they were having nothing. This is the irregular imperfective echo. They were having nothing to speak against, to say to the contrary, to say against. Antepain, it's aping an aorist, and ain is an aorist ending. Well, there you have it. Some very important verses here. They see the guy. They've obviously he's been healed. Everybody knows it. You can't deny it. All they can say is, stop preaching about this Jesus guy. But, you know, of course, Peter, there's no other name under heaven whereby we can be saved. We're going to keep preaching. Sorry. And we'll see that next week as well. And, of course, they perceived that they'd been with Jesus, even though they were uneducated, untrained, you know, and, of course, we believe this as Christians, that you don't have to have a seminary degree for God to use you. Of course, there's some people who would say having a seminary degree makes it harder for God to use you. I don't want to say that. May that not be the case. Certainly, that was not when I had a part in founding a seminary, Wesley Seminary, and certainly it was never. I mean, that was one of those things. We are going to make sure that this seminary does not in any way tamper with people's spirituality. That was part of our founding vision, that this would be a seminary where spirituality went hand in hand. The way I used to teach it is, sorry, I'm remembering the good old days, that even though your head might be blowing up, your heart would be there to catch it. That we would challenge you intellectually, but there would be such a focus on your heart relationship that it wouldn't damage your head challenges would not challenge your heart. That was the founding vision then. Of course, it's in other hands now, so it's up to them to do with that what they want. Well, have a lovely day. I hope to. We'll see.